Okay, hi Tim, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So Tim Mccosker, right?
Yes, sir.
You are running for Council District 15 since 15 is becoming an empty seat. Joe Buscaino, even though he dropped out yesterday, he announced that he will not rerun for his third term.
Correct.
Please introduce yourself to our viewers and readers.
Thank you very much, Michael. Tim Mccosker. I'm 59 years old. I'm a lifetime resident of the Harbor area. My family came to this country and to this part of the country for work in and around the harbor. I was raised in a family of firefighters. My father was an LA City firefighter. My two older brothers were firefighters as well. I went to law school, and my form of public service was to represent cities as city attorney. And I was Jim Hahn's chief deputy city attorney, and then when he became mayor, I was his chief of staff. Since then, I've been practicing law. And now, because Joe Buscaino decided to run for mayor and vacated the seat, I jumped into this race.
When was that? When you worked for Deputy Chief of Staff for James Hahn?
So in Jim Hahn's last term as city attorney, which was in the late 90s, I came in to be his chief deputy city attorney. And when he ran for mayor and won in 2001, he served from 2001 and 2005, and I was the chief of staff for that entire term.
Okay. So why did you decide to run, and why do you stand out among all the candidates?
I decided to run because for my entire life, frankly, I've been interested in local government and in service to community. And so when I was a youth, I went into the law and I represented cities as city attorney. At every opportunity, I've joined boards and commissions to make sure that I'm serving the community, whether it was through a hospital board or a housing board or a business representative at the chamber. And my wife and I raised 5 children. And so there was a period of time when we were raising a family that it didn't make sense for me to run. So while I've been active in government, active in service, this is really the time in my life. Over the course of my entire life, I've wanted to do this, but this is the time that it makes sense. What distinguishes me? What distinguishes me is that I do have the experience and the proven track record. The experience of having been in the government and the experience of having been on the outside of the government working with nonprofit organizations and getting a 360-degree view of what the city can and should be. And I also have a proven track record of serving my communities of the 15th district.
Among all that, you having 5 children was the one that caught my eye.
Yes.
Was that planned, or you just?
Yes, my wife and I, Connie was also raised here in the community. We wanted a large family, and thank God the kids are all happy and well, and they're grown. The point being is that the kids are grown and they're doing well, and they're working on the campaign, and this is a family decision to run for office.
When you look at 15th district, I'm not talking about whether it's a Republican or Democrat sense, but do you think it leans slightly, do you think it's a moderate district? Because I think CD 12 and 15 always seem to be a little bit different from other districts when I look at it. Do you think it's more moderate or slightly lean to the right, or what is your thought?
Well, CD 15 is a very unique and very diverse district, and think of it just as geography. It's 13 miles long from the harbor to Watts. And it's a nonpartisan seat, but I would say it's a very working class district. It's a district that is very interested in the issues that working people are interested in, jobs, economic development, bringing down the cost of housing, safe neighborhoods. I mean, this is a district that wants to be sure that we have safe and healthy neighborhoods. So I would call it a working class, diverse, and unique district.
Many people, the constituents here, or whether our readers, our viewers, when I meet them, the number one concern is safety, and also they are really tired of all these gas prices going up and the inflation. And I think I can feel that people feeling pressure, my colleagues feeling pressures. They try to save, they penny pinch a little bit compared to before. What's your thought on that?
Well, we have so many stresses on families right now. We have the high cost of housing. We have the high cost of food, the high cost of gas. And so we see all of these prices going up, and we don't see wages going up. And what we need to do at the city council level, what we need to do at the local level, is we need to work harder to bring in good jobs, to maintain really good jobs, and to do what we can to bring down the costs of living. We can affect the cost of housing. We really, really can. We can bring services to the community and bring jobs and housing closer together so that while the gas prices might not come down, the transportation costs can come down. We can invest in local transportation systems so that folks are spending less of their income. Our goal is to have them spend less of their income on housing, on transportation, and on food, just by bringing those services together and creating more diversity of foods, like farmers markets, and bringing in more stores and creating opportunity for local businesses to be close to residential. So our role is to bring those services together and bring down just the burdens of the cost of living.
What do you think about George Gascon and the zero bail policy? Many people are also interested in that because they see what on the local news, and there are people who got, who I know got directly damaged. You know, the smash and grab,
Right.
and people just being let go back on the streets. It's like insane. You know, the city has gone really progressive. I think probably 2 years ago, I think people felt it. You have councilwoman. Even CD4, I think she's very progressive, you know. But do you think pendulum is swinging the other way? What's your thought on that about Gascon and zero bail? First that, and also do you think whether the pendulum is swinging the other way?
What I learned when I was with Jim Hahn, remember I was in the city attorney's office, and we had both a civil practice as well as a prosecution practice. So we, half of our office was prosecution. What I learned is that one cannot have a policy with no exceptions. There needs to always be a consideration of what is good for the health and safety of a community. And so while the pendulum may swing to the left, you always have to consider what are the rights of property owners, what are the rights of victims. And so I do see on public safety, I see this pendulum swinging, maybe swinging too fast. And what we need to do is always keep in mind that we need to pay attention to what are the trends in crime, violent crime or property crimes, and we need to make sure that we have the public safety measures to bring safety to our neighborhoods. So I would never be on the side of an absolute policy, one way or the other. We need to make sure that we are being flexible and addressing crime and making people feel safe in their neighborhoods and in their businesses.
When you talk with the constituents, do you feel that they're leaning more conservative than before? Or they want more police on the streets?
What I find is that in the 15th district, across the district, because I spend a lot of time in Watts with the Watts Gang Task Force, I spend a lot of time in the Gateway and Harbor City and Wilmington and San Pedro. What I have found here is that what the constituents have wanted all along is they want a well-trained, effective, constitutional police department. And they also want to have a relationship to the department. So they want to make sure that communities have their senior lead officers, that they have their community safety partnership, that we have mechanisms where we're investing in community events, where police support and we support police. And they're not looking to defund. What they're looking for is an effective, well-trained public safety system.
Okay, so you also support hiring more, mental health specialists rather than always dispatching police to these situations?
Absolutely. So because the police department and the fire department are 24-hour operations, we tend to put a lot of our social needs on them. And it is really unfair to those.
You do think that the police have been overworked?
I think the police have been overburdened with some of the things that are not within the portfolio of policing. And so I do think it makes sense to have more mental health specialists, drug interventionists, counselors, social service folks who can be out in the community and can address those issues that can be addressed without the need of a police officer, and let the police department deal with the suppression of crime and solving crime.
You didn't answer about the Gascon. You don't want to. Do you support the recall? Because George Gascon, I think, is probably the most controversial figure in Southern California right now. I think probably, I mean, he's a national figure now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see him being mentioned on CNN and Fox News, and
Yeah,
do you support it?
I have not taken a position on the recall, and I'm
How
going.
about zero bail policy? Do you support that?
I do not support the zero bail policy.
Okay. You don't want to elaborate on that?
Nope.
Okay. How is Watts now? You know, we know that Watts had riot back in the day. Is it different now? You know, many people are not that familiar. I think other than people who live there. Can you break down those areas that your constituents, you know, Watts and even San Pedro, Harbor City?
Yeah, Watts is a diverse itself, compact community, just a couple of square miles, with a very rich African American history and a very large Latino population. And Watts has a number of really great nonprofit organizations and folks who are working on issues of peace and food security, and it has a great network of private organizations, nonprofit organizations, and what Watts is really looking for in its next step is for local leadership to kind of take control of its own development, its own path forward, whether that's housing or retail development, preserving some of its great historic assets. Watts is a beautiful community and is ready to take off and needs leadership that empowers local leadership. The Harbor Gateway is another piece of the community as you move down south. The Harbor Gateway today in the neighborhood council movement is divided between Harbor Gateway North and Harbor Gateway South. That's a function of the neighborhood council divisions, and it's a community because of its odd geography that really wants to establish an identity, really wants to take control of its land use decisions, of the environmental effects of the freeway and traffic and logistics, and it can do so, and I want to empower that community to do so. Wilmington is another part of the community. It's a beautiful community, heavily Latino part of the district, heavily reliant on the good jobs that come from the harbor, but also facing some of the environmental impacts from industry and from the harbor and from oil and gas. And so we want to empower Wilmington to make sure that we're dealing with those environmental impacts and retaining really, really good jobs. Harbor City, much of the same. Harbor City is just to the north of the harbor area, very reliant upon harbor jobs and logistics, and we want to make sure that we're empowering that community, and we need to bring more services and more recreational activities and programming in Harbor City. And then San Pedro, as the far south end of the district, is looking at a great boom in economic development right now with the waterfront development and with housing, and also very reliant upon the harbor for jobs and economic development.
Were your constituents directly affected because of the supply chain issues?
Yes. Well, the supply chain issues, affected the entire country, the entire world economy, as you know. But also because of the pileup and because of the pileup of ships out there, we have had and continue to have the environmental effects of ships just waiting and burning fuel out there. We've had the women and men of the Longshore Union have done a fantastic job of moving the goods, but there's just so much coming in. And then one of the great difficulties is once the containers hit the dock and they get on trailers and the containers begin to move, there are very few places for them to go. And so we're having these traffic impacts and we're having this congestion, especially throughout Wilmington. And so that impact has been really bad on neighborhoods.
How about the homelessness issue? I see homeless people, especially on the what do you call it, Lamita McCoy?
Yeah.
That area, they get removed, they come back, remove, come back. I think it's just a constant, play. It's like record skipping over and over again. How would you like to solve the homelessness issue?
We need to think of the entire continuum. I mean, shelter has a role, and we've done a pretty good job of creating shelter. We need to make sure we maintain that shelter, but that's not the permanent solution. Shelter is not forever. What we need to do is make sure with our HHH, because we taxed ourselves, and our H dollars, we need to make sure that we're effectively using those dollars and getting those units up and running. and to make sure that we're working well with the county, because the county under the H has all of the resources and the ability and the know-how on services to make sure that as folks come in, they get the mental health services, the drug addiction services that can get them onto a path that gets them then out of that transitional housing and into into more a permanent living situation. So I think we need to be really, really focused on not just one piece of this, but the entire spectrum, and then bring down the cost of housing with more starts, greater density, and as we talked about before, the cost of living. Make sure that services, whether it's jobs or amenities like food that are in close proximity to housing, so that folks are spending less of their income on those essentials and can have a stable life.
Isn't developing the housing not an easy thing here in Southern California because of all the regulations and CEQA approval? And it seems like, can you answer that first? And
Sure.
Also, I want to talk about Triple H. Many people think that is a failure. I think it is. There has been reported that one unit cost $800,000. I bet you already know that. I think that's insane. It would better send that homeless person out of state and probably purchase a property there and even give them some rent fees for a year or something.
Both parts of your questions are directly related. The city of Los Angeles makes it far too difficult to process the development. When one makes a decision that I'm going to acquire a piece of land and that entity is going to develop the land, there is very little certainty in what the steps are, because the city makes it difficult and does not coordinate its own silos, whether it's the approvals in planning or building and safety or fire or DOT. DWP is one of the big ones. What I'd like to do is I'd like to coordinate an Office of Economic Development, like other jurisdictions have done, where you bring all of those resources together and you make sure that the goal of the city is not a gotcha, but the goal of the city is to approve good projects and approve them quickly, because time costs a lot of money. And revising plans and having contradictory policies within the city costs a lot of money. On the HHH, I think the oversight, I think that's one of the problems is that the city just makes it too difficult to approve the projects that they say that they want.
That's why it costs that much, right?
And that's part of why it costs that much. And we also
the labor unions.
We need better oversight. We need much better oversight on how these projects are being developed to make sure they're not loading in costs or cost pluses on transfer of land, and making sure that we are getting value for our dollars. So we do have to bring those costs down. Also, I think it makes sense for us to really look at adaptive reuse of existing facilities.
That's what many people say, but they don't do, I think, yeah.
Right. When I was with Jim Hahn back in, years ago, we actually did an adaptive reuse ordinance in downtown Los Angeles. And we basically did one CEQA document, and said within this downtown area, you can adaptively reuse buildings for various purposes. And it was a very effective tool. And folks remember that adaptive reuse ordinance as an effective way to bring on the renaissance of downtown Los Angeles. We can do that. We can do the same with housing throughout the city.
So I was talking this with Lanny Chen, who was a candidate for state controller. He's a Republican, but even he got the endorsement by LA Times. I was kind of surprised. But Lanny Chen said we need to audit the Triple H, the whole thing. Do you agree with that?
Completely agree. I mean, the sanitizing light of day is good for everybody. See exactly how we get from step one to that very expensive unit. What are all of the pieces? And then we evaluate how we can bring down those costs.
Do you think the quality of life for Angelenos has been going down in recent years? Because I see many people move, even some of my friends moved to different states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee, and they're tired of many things here, because of like the pay is not going up as the inflation. Gas price, particularly, it's more expensive here because of the gas tax. And I want to know your opinion about whether we should get rid of the gas tax for a while. What's your thought on that?
So going to the first part of your question, I do think that folks believe, because it's true, that the quality of life is diminished. And a lot of factors. I mean, I think that we've lost a lot of services from the city. We haven't even restored the services that we had from the 2009 recession, for example. I mean, there are still ravages of that recession where we lost daycare centers, for example. We had 26 daycare centers in the city of Los Angeles, and we closed them at the recession. This is just one example, and we closed them at that recession because we had to.
All of them, or how many?
24 of them. There's only
So
two
there's
left.
only 2 left.
So we're just now getting to the point where
And those were city operated.
those were city operated and available to the general community. Just as one example.
That is true.
Just as one example. They were in parks and recreation centers. And there are numerous examples of those types of services having been cut and not restored. And then you fast forward to the pandemic, and the pandemic, created I don't want to blame it all on the pandemic, but it created a lot of disruption of services and brought down folks' quality of life. And we see the city struggling to restore services. And there is money in the government. We have big surpluses at the state, and we need to make sure that we're using those surpluses in a way, I know what you're gonna say, using those surpluses in a way where it's getting back to restoring services. But the other thing is, one of the ways that we can create relief is waiving or creating a holiday for some of these things like a gas tax or a VLF. So I do agree with that, and it needs to be done in an effective way with where the benefit actually goes into the pockets of consumers who will use it for important things like gas and groceries and rent.
I think the lockdown was probably too severe in this city compared to other places all around the country, especially if you compare it like Florida and some areas. That was severe, and I know California has always been saying that they're in surplus, right? Like record surplus. But some people have been even doubting that, even including Lanny Chen. He said he wants to even audit that is whether it's true or not, because we don't see this result for that. So if it's surplus, then we shouldn't have all these kind of issues. And the state is actually, I think, is in decline. And do you share that view? Do you
On auditing and making sure we know exactly where the dollars are.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And because I heard that we don't have a checkbook system here. California is the only state among all 50 states that doesn't have a checkbook system, where you can see where they're spending all these surpluses.
Yeah, I think transparency and opening up the books and letting folks know where their dollars are and where they're going makes sense. Auditing, having watchdogs in the government at every level makes a lot of sense for auditing. I mean, I think that to restore just faith in government, I think greater transparency, availability of information, and responsiveness by elected officials at every level extraordinarily important.
Did you support the defund the police movement 2 years ago, or you did not?
Did not.
You did not. Okay. And do you think that kind of movement would happen again, or people haven't really, have learned their lessons, so to speak?
Well, I think that was a very emotional time where I think that there were
the George Floyd situation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I understand that. But
Yeah.
what I'm tired of, many people are tired of, is how can we just let one incident affect the entire nation to
Right.
such an extent when we
Right.
have these situations? And George Floyd, that was murder, what Derek Chauvin did.
Right.
But I wouldn't consider George Floyd a model citizen. And if another event like that happens, then that movement can happen anytime, right? The defund the police movement. If this kind of situation will happen somewhere, we have a rotten apple situation.
That was a murder.
Yeah, that was
And it was wrong.
without a doubt. Yeah.
Without a doubt, and it was
Yeah.
wrong. And the reaction to that murder was deeply emotional and heartfelt and worldwide. I think, though, that it's very important for us to, when we react, we need to react in a way that's responsive to the problem. And what we need is training and accountability for any police agency anywhere in the country. And the LAPD has gone through a lot of reform over the years, and we'll always need to go through more, clearly. And we need to stay on that path of reform, making neighborhoods safe, and making the relationship between the police and the communities, trusted and close and community-based.
What's your thought about like environmental issues or energy issues? You could say there has been many emphasis, especially in California, about alternative energy, wind, solar, and what I feel is like the wind and solar power has not generated enough income or jobs. And we have companies like Solyndra went bankrupt in California. And fossil fuel, I'm very sensitive to smog and all that, so I like clean air. I really care about it.
Yep.
But I think we have to also consider the quality of life, especially the gas price here is more expensive than any other state. Do you think we have to? Do you think that California is kind of becoming too radical to transition our energy reliance from fossil fuel to other energy that we didn't find yet, probably, but that we're trying to find? And your thoughts about nuclear power, these climate change issue. Climate change, when I read the Times, it's always on the front page all the time, probably at least half of the month. And this pressures us not to use fossil fuel, so to speak, right? But what I think is, just by pressuring that, it doesn't give us any answers, and nobody's that rich. I'm not that rich to purchase a Tesla or electric car. So the people who pump their gas, they are feeling the pressure. Like I have a Tesla. I bought it because I knew that Biden administration coming in, that would probably go up. I paid $21 to fill up my car. Now it's costing me close to $60. So don't we need some kind of like a middle ground here?
We need a just transition. And this is this district and the harbor area particularly really rely upon the port jobs, and the port jobs are associated with some of these fossil fuel companies. And we know that climate change is an important existential question for us. I think everyone agrees it's going to be important for us to transition to fuels that are clean and safe for the planet. But we need to do it in a way where we are protecting jobs and making just transitions for those folks who work in the industry. And I would add to the list in your question that we need to look at hydrogen, for example. So the Department of Energy right now has a competition for a hydrogen hub. And the city of Los Angeles and the company that I used to be CEO of, Altasea, is actually competing for that hydrogen hub. And the idea is to create clean, green hydrogen by actually using wind and solar to crack the hydrogen atoms, take the hydrogen and bring it back to the port and fuel port operations with hydrogen. In that technology, there are good jobs. There are really, really, really good jobs. And we need to make sure that we are, partnering with the existing entities to transition them and their employees into good jobs. Because we do know, too, that not only is it imperative for the planet, but we know that Wall Street and the consumer are going to increasingly demand that we have, clean energy systems. And so I'm committed to working on those clean energy systems, and I'm also committed to a just transition for our economy.
Do you have relationships with the Korean American community? I just wanted to know. Through
leaders in the Korean American community, particularly our mutual friend, John Lee.
Did he endorse you?
He did.
Okay.
He did. He's a lovely guy. And one of my best friends in the world is a guy named Don Liu. John Lee is a very good friend.
Don Liu is a port. He used to be a deputy mayor. Right?
He was a deputy mayor, and he lives here in this community, and he's been a good friend of mine. He's now the general manager of the convention bureau.
Oh, he moved out of. He was in the port for a while, right?
He was in the port. Yeah, he had an executive job in the port, and now he's the. I'm sure he's the highest-ranking non-elected Korean American in Los Angeles, because he's a general manager.
Yeah.
He's a general manager of a very important division. Anyway, so the answer is yes. And I also enjoyed, when we was with Jim Han, we enjoyed really rich and beneficial relationships, really great relationships with the Korean American community.
How are you doing on the fundraising front?
Very well, very well. Yeah, we've raised to our goal. And we have been very effective in being able to raise money to communicate our message. directly to the voters.
How about your internal poll? Did you do any internal polling compared to other candidates?
Well, it's not. We have not done polling in this race, track polling, if that's what you're asking about. We did initial polling and saw some very positive things about our candidacy and our message.
Okay. Is there a candidate that you endorsed or support for the mayoral election, or you want to stay out?
No,
Okay,
I think it makes sense for me to focus on
Yes.
my race.
Got it. And what was I about to ask you? Any last words you want to say?
I really appreciate this discussion. This race has been a great opportunity to renew relationships that I've had for 20, 25 years, deepen those relationships. CD15 has been my life, and serving Los Angeles has been generationally my family's life. And so I've really enjoyed, getting out, talking to the constituents about what they need, what they want, and I'm looking forward to the primary.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Tim.
you.